When God calls Moses to do this great task, right? Go to Egypt and tell Pharaoh, let my people go, all that kind of stuff. He says that he has seen the suffering of his people and he's heard their cries, and now he's sending Moses. And sometimes I think we can almost take that verse wrong. We get the wrong idea when we read that, and that we read it and think that it means God wasn't paying attention to the people. That all of a sudden their suffering got bad enough, their cries got loud enough that, oh, now I've heard them and now I got to go do something. Almost like, when a kid is playing in the other room and hurts himself and starts crying, and we run in to check on him or something. Like that's how it was for the Israelites and God here. And that's not at all what God is saying. In fact, if we look back, God knew all along how long they were going to spend there. In Genesis 15:13, it's talking to Abram. This is before Isaac's even born. In Genesis 15, tells him, the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years, your descendants will be strangers in the country not their own. They will be enslaved and mistreated there, but I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. God knew all along exactly how long the people were going to be in Israel. He knew all along how everything was going to work, from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Joseph, and the whole way that they were going to end up in Egypt to begin with. God knew all of that. God saw all of that. And they're there for 400 years. And I'm sure, if you're in the middle of those 400 years, you're crying out, you're going, God, where are you? You sent us down here. They probably had heard the story of how God had worked in Joseph's life and made all these things happen. And in a lot of ways, very similar to what Joseph went through. He goes to prison. He's enslaved. He has all these horrible, hard things happen. And at just the right time, he gets elevated and he gets to meet Pharaoh and interpret those dreams. And all this stuff happens at just the right time so that it saves all those people. And the same thing is true with those years of slavery that Israel goes through. And God is waiting, and God is putting things together just right so that he can do things just the way they're supposed to be. Exactly the right time, in exactly the right way, so that he can make himself known to the world. So that there is no doubt when God brings the people out of Egypt that God has done it. As they're entering the promised land for the next several books, all the way even into Joshua, when they're taking over the promised land, time and time again, you hear about, they had heard about Israel and their God. They don't just hear, Israel's really tough and we don't want to fight them. No, they hear, Israel's God, that's not somebody we want to mess with. He brings victory for them. He is powerful. He does all these things for them. That happens because of how he brings them out of Egypt and when he brings them out of Egypt. God's timing is never an accident. We don't always understand it, especially when we're in the middle of it and we just keep thinking, God, aren't you going to do something now? Like how much longer are we going to have to wait for you? And yet God is waiting for just the right time because he knows better than we do when things should happen. As there's so many times in my life, especially as I look back on things and reflect on times that I moved and some big things that happened in our lives, going to college and marriage and kids and, buying my first house and things like that. There are a whole lot of those things that didn't happen when or how I would have chosen them to. Almost, especially moving as a kid, I didn't want to move. When I was 11 years old and thought I was on top of the world, living in Artesia, I thought things were great. And we moved, and looking back, it was it was definitely such a good thing for me spiritually to be somewhere else. And going to college, most people didn't understand. I wasn't even fully understanding of why I felt like God wanted me to go to UNM and stuff. And yet I found so much Jesus there. I can't imagine where I would be with him if I hadn't gone there and met the people I did and experienced the things I did. I can look back so clearly and see how God has guided all those things. Joni and I really wanted Jeremiah and Alyssa to be a little closer in age. We thought we had a plan. And as soon as we gave up on the plan, God said, okay, now it's time. Right? So many things that we thought it was going to go one way, and God knew exactly how it was supposed to go and worked it out. And that's how it is here for the people of Israel. It's not like they started crying out now and all of a sudden God's like, I should really do something about this. No, he has known. I mean, he's telling Abraham here, this is Joseph's great-grandfather, okay? Right? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, the one who takes them into Egypt. He's the reason they end up there. It's generations before he's even born. Joseph's grandfather has not even been born yet, and God's already telling Abram, hey, by the way, your great-grandson is going to be the one that leads these people down. He doesn't give Abraham those specifics, but the timeline fits, right? He says, you're going to have people, your family is going to go down here, and then for 400 years, it's exactly how long they're there until Moses shows up, and God calls Moses to come and bring the people out. God knew all along what he was doing. He didn't do it according to the people's timeline, to how they felt. He did it according to his. And you know, especially in our current cultural climate, everything that's going on with COVID and just all kinds of craziness in our world, like it seems. And there's a lot of time where we're crying out, like, God, why aren't you showing up? Why aren't you doing something? I think we need to remember two things. One, he is. When the people of Israel are crying out, God is already working. He is doing things in them. The fact that they are such a huge nation is incredible. Over a 400-year span, 70 people go in to Egypt in the family of Jacob. His sons and their kids, there's 70 of them total. And here we are 400 years later. And yeah, that's a long time, but their estimates show there's 2.5 million of them by now. They have grown. God has blessed them. He has done things already, and he is constantly working. Even if he doesn't work and do the things they think should do, he hasn't brought them out of that slavery yet, but he's working and he's moving among them. He's taking care of them. And then he raises up Moses. And Moses is the perfect person to do this job. He had the experience. He'd grown up in Pharaoh's house, and then he goes off to be a shepherd in the same wilderness where these people are going to wander around. Moses has spent 40 years there already. He's bringing all those things together. He's working, as Paul puts it, he's working for the good of those who love him. Folks, he's working for the good of those who love him right now. And in his timing and in his way, he's going to take care of us. It's not always going to look like how we want it. It's not just going to, all right, God, just wipe this problem away. No, sometimes it's him walking through that thing with us. It's him getting us through that, getting us past that. He works in his way and in his time. The people of Israel were waiting 400 years, but God came through and did what only God could do. Folks, God's going to do the same thing for us. He will show up. He will do the same for us. He hears us when we cry, and he's going to do things the way that only God can do. And he's going to do it when God's ready to do it, in his timing, not ours. It's not our job to figure all that out. It's not our job to scream louder so we get his attention. It's our job to trust him, to know that he hears us, and that he's going to take care of us. Love you guys. See you soon.